this church and the blessing you are to me and my wife, and I think to everyone around us. And just really thankful to be in this church, thankful to be back from Florida, thankful to be around God's people who want to live for the Lord and serve Him. We found out like Thursday-ish that we weren't going to be able to have a pastor today, and so I was going to do both lessons just because I felt bad about maybe someone not being able to have enough time to prepare. And I apologize to you all as a church and the men. I need to be better about just delegating those out, because I don't want to act like I'm trying to take the show, if you want to call it that. But that's why I'm giving both lessons today, not because of anything. It's just we're trying to get Brother Cantu back, and he's had some scheduling issues. But I know we'll keep working on it, and Lord will provide as He needs to. But before we get into the text, remember those who need prayer. I think we need to pray for all of us, pray for each other. Pray for Jason and his kidney stone, the pain sometimes he still faces. Pray for Brian and his foot pain and sounds like leg pain now. And pray for Brother Tyler's kidney stone and the things that he's asked prayer for. He's also traveling to Nashville Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Hopefully to be back in church on Wednesday. But just pray for him as he goes down there. And as he knows, Benjamin and Mark left, and I don't know if anyone hadn't heard, but Benjamin's having some of the same issues he was having before. So Mark's taken to the doctor hospital up here. So just keep him in your prayers as well, and the Lord help. And pray for Mark in general, as the things he's going through, and his children. And I know Al and I, we go out of town in about 2 weeks, November 5th through the 9th. And then I know when we get back that Saturday, the boys are flying out for their cruise, Tyler and Nathan. So just remember all those in prayer, and pray for Roger and his farm hands as they finish up harvesting. And I know Stephanie's Dairy Queen's closing up soon, and I know that's a stressful time. And I know there's stressful times everywhere, so just keep everyone in your prayers, and the Lord will help and provide. And I've really been blessed today by the lessons we've heard. And you always are nervous when you bring a lesson, because you want it to be what God wants you to bring, and it's almost a breath of relief when you hear brethren bring messages that line up with what God has put on your heart. And so if you have your Bibles this morning, if you would, turn to the book of Deuteronomy. And I apologize if I cough a whole lot. I don't know. I went from cold weather to Houston, where it was in the 90s, back to the cold. So I think my system's a little off, but I'm trying to wash my hands really good before I shake your hand. So try and be aware. But Deuteronomy was something that the Lord has just laid on my heart for quite some time now, because I'm a history buff, and I want to know about the Bible and why things happen the way they happen. And Deuteronomy's been brought up over and over and over, and I've heard it over and over. And this is what I was reading about and studying before Wednesday night, when the Lord changed my way of thinking. But I wanted to study the book of Deuteronomy. Just felt led of the Lord to study it, whether it's for myself and you all can listen and hear, or and if you don't want to, then there's a pastor. He went through the book of Deuteronomy. He says, if you don't like Deuteronomy, we'll see you in 8 months, because that's how long he went through. I don't know how long we'll go. Hopefully we'll have a pastor before then. But the book of Deuteronomy is Moses' last message to the nation of Israel. It's also his fifth message. Is the fifth book of the law, as it's often called, or the fifth book of Moses. Some Bible scholars even say that this book is to provide the new generation of Israel a reminder of their covenant with God as they prepare to take over the land God has promised them. Obviously, the older generation has passed away due to their sin in the wilderness. And we'll go, if you actually, so like Brother Jason did, keep a marker in Deuteronomy chapter 1, but if you will, turn to Numbers. And there's a lot to unpack in this whole thing, and I'm not going to even do it justice, because I'm unfortunately not a Bible scholar, and I'm not smart enough to really know. I got my master's degree by the skin of my hair, or skin of my teeth, so we're going to try to do it the best we can. But I was reading it today, and I was telling Allie this morning, I said, man, this book is awesome. Like, there's some of the things we'll read in here, and some of the things you'll hear about from Abraham. And a lot of it lines up with the promises that God has given, that he's still following on today, that we need to trust him, whether we're in the ship or we're Joshua. And I really like Joshua as well. He's an awesome leader. The Lord did a lot of good with him. Numbers 13, if you turn there, verse 17. And so we read about, and I don't want to ever assume that everyone knows what has happened in the Bible, or everyone has been blessed to be raised in a home that taught them Bible stories, because not everyone has. But in Numbers 13, verse 17, we read about Israel's sin against God, which is what kept them in the wilderness for 40 days or 40 years. And so we'll kind of skip around a little bit here, but in Numbers chapter 13, verse 17, and Moses sent them to spy, them being a spy, one man out of each tribe to go, so 12 men, to spy out the land of Canaan. And said unto them, Get ye up this way southward, and go up into the mountain, and see the land what it is, and the people that dwelleth therein, where they be strong or weak, few or many, and what the land is that they dwell in, whether it be good or bad, and what cities they be that dwell in, wherein with tents or in strongholds, and what the land is, whether it be fat or lean, whether there be good, whether there be wood therein or not, and be of good courage, and bring of the fruit of the land. Now the time was the time of the first ripe grapes. So they went up, they being the spies, and searched the land from the wilderness of Zin unto Rehob, as the men came to Hamath. And they ascended by the south and came to Hebron, where Ahiman, Shishah, and Talmai, the children of Anak, were. Now Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. And they came unto the brook of Eshcol, and cut down from thence a branch, one cluster of grapes, and they bare it between two upon a staff, and they brought of the pomegranates of the fig. The place was called the brook of Eshcol, because of the cluster of grapes where the children of Israel cut down from thence. And they returned from searching of the land after 40 days, and they went and came to Moses and to Aaron and to all the congregation of the children of Israel into the wilderness of Paran to Kadesh, and brought back word unto them and unto the congregation, and showed them the fruit of the land. And a really neat thing I just remember thinking here is Joshua was one of these spies. And so we read today about Joshua and the man he was. And he was one of the 12 that went. And we'll read more about him later. And they told him and said, We come unto the land whither thou sendest, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and there is fruit of it. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. And the Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, and the Hittites, and the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea, and by the coast of Jordan. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses, and said, Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. And I want to stop here. Brother Jason brought out, if we go through storms and those who are lost see us rattled or scared, it can ruin our testimony. And what a testimony Caleb has. He says we are well able to overcome it. I don't think it's because they had the best army, they had the best war technology, they had the best weapons. I believe he felt they were well able to overcome it because God had promised him it. And he dwelt in that promise. He had faith in God that they were able to overcome no matter what they saw. I hope as a church we can be a Caleb to other people. We can be a Caleb. We as individuals can be a Caleb, because there's some great faith there that he, without, all of his friends were sitting here telling him, oh, it's scary, strong walls, big people, yada, yada, yada. And Caleb stilled them before, and then just said, Moses, we are well able to overcome it. But verse 31, but the men that went up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, the land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And when we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come to giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron. The whole congregation said unto them, would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in this wilderness? And wherefore hath the Lord brought us unto this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be prey? Were it better not for us to return to Egypt? And they said one to another, let us make a captain, and let us return to Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their face before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. And then if you'll just skip down a few verses to 11. And the Lord said unto Moses, how long will this people provoke me? And how long will it be ere they believe me for all the signs that I have showed among them? Jason talked this morning about a verse that kind of stopped him in his tracks. That stopped me in mine. How much has God shown us? How much has God shown you? You know, we look at these Israelites and think, just go. Just go. God has promised you this. Just go. But then you read 14 verse 11 and you think, well, I provoked the Lord with doubt. Yeah, he's shown me a whole lot, but I still don't always act and talk like I believe in him. He says, for all the signs I have showed among them, man, how much has God shown you? He's shown me quite a lot. But I find myself still like the Israelites, doubting and provoking God. Verse 12, I will smite them with the pestilence and disinherit them, and will make of thee a greater nation and mightier than they. And Moses said unto the Lord, then the Egyptians shall hear it, for thou broughtest up this people in thy might from among them. And they will tell it to the inhabitants of the land, for they have heard that thou, Lord, art amongst this people, for thou, Lord, art seen face to face, and they that cloud standeth over them, and they that goest before them by day time in a pillar of a cloud and a pillar of fire by night. So God he's fed up. He's through with the children of Israel for their constant sin and provoking. And we see Moses begging and pleading with God, trying to get him to go back on him basically being done with the children of Israel. But if you read down in verse 26, we'll see God's punishment for their sin. So we see their sin of doubt. We see their sin of provoking God and murmuring against him, asking him to go back to Egypt, wanting to find another leader. They waited 400 years for Moses. Well, then they want to just go find another one to go right back to Egypt because it's been a rough few days. They had 400 years of bondage, and they forgot about that in a few days. Before we get high and mighty and look at them Israelites with a pink finger pointing down, God's provided for me for 29 years, and I'll come up with something, and I'll think, oh, no, it's going to happen. Oh, no, what are we going to do? You know, Al and I, we were talking about something come up, and I got, we were talking about it. It's exciting, and I was like, how are we going to be able to afford this? Do I have to get a second job? Do I have to do this? And then I looked at her and said, wait a minute. If God got us out of Florida, we're good. We're fine. We'll be all right. But we often do that, right? God provides a blessing that we've always wanted, or we thought about, or we talked about, or an opportunity to do something we've talked about, and then we can't think, thank you, Lord, for the blessing. I know you'll take care of us, just like you answered this prayer. But we think about, oh no, what can he do? But verse 26 in Numbers 14, and the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, saying, how long shall I bear with this evil congregation which murmur against me? I have heard the murmurings of the children of Israel, which they murmur against me. Say unto them, as truly as I live, saith the Lord, as ye have spoken in mine ears, so will I do to you. Your carcasses shall fall in the wilderness, and all that were numbered of you, according to your whole number, from 20 years old and upward, which have murmured against me. Doubtless ye shall not come into the land, concerning which I swear to make you dwell therein, save Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, the son of Nun. Be but your little ones, which ye said should be a prey, them will I bring in, and they shall know the land which ye have despised. But as for you, your carcasses, they shall fall in this wilderness, and your children shall wander in the wilderness 40 years, and bear your whoredoms until your carcasses be wasted in the wilderness. And the numbers of the days in which ye search the land, even 40 days, each day for a year, shall be your iniquities. Even 40 years, ye shall know my breach of a promise. I, the Lord, have said, I will surely do it unto all this evil congregation that are gathered together against me. In this wilderness they shall be consumed, and there they shall die. And the men which Moses sent to search the land, who returned and made all the congregation to murmur against him by bringing up a slander upon the land, even those men that did bring up the evil report upon the land, die by the plague before the Lord. So we see here that God has told him that everyone under 20 years old, except for Caleb and Joshua, will die. And you notice he doesn't even mention Moses. He didn't spare Moses because I believe he knew what Moses would do was striking the rock when God told him to speak to it. But he only mentions Caleb and Joshua, and that everyone else that they thought were weak or prey would grow up to be strong enough to learn from their previous generation's mistakes and inherit the land, and they'll be cast into to wander for 40 years. And we see too, when we were reading in Numbers chapter 13, verse 31 through 33, you don't have to turn there, but Caleb, and I believe Joshua as well, but Caleb rose up and tried to instill confidence in the people and Moses that they were able to take this land. And 10 of these other men murmured against God. They murmured against Moses, and they brought this whole congregation down. They brought this whole nation down with their negativity and their doubt and the disbelief against God. Brothers and sisters, we need to be careful with our conversation. We need to be careful in how we talk to one another and how we talk about our God. We need to be careful in our influence in this church, and our influences in our groups of people, and our influence in our families, because these 10 men spoke ill wills and murmurs of God, and then it brought them to think that God had forgotten them, and they'd rather go back to Egypt, and God was done with them. Don't be a bad influence. And if you see a brother that's wanting to be, one, don't listen to it, but two, go to him in love and pray for him and let him know the God that we serve, who has made us well able to overcome any challenge, like Caleb was trying to do. So how often, if we truly look at ourselves, are we like this nation? How many miracles have you seen in your life? I can think of one right there for me. The Lord plucked her out of a family that was hell-bound and that cared nothing of God, but everything of the world. Softened and molded her heart and a people that wanted nothing to do with us being together or going to church together. And now she's a God-fearing woman. But yet I still doubt. I still doubt what God can do. As we talked about all day today, we still doubt. How many times has God provided for you and your family, and yet something else comes up and all of a sudden we have no idea how we're going to get through it? If we're really honest with ourselves, I deserve to hear the same message from God as the people did in Numbers 14, verse 27, where he says, I'm through with you. I'm done with this evil generation. Because that's me to a T. It's pathetic how many times God has blessed us, but yet I still complain, I still murmur, and I still doubt. In Florida, when we actually got down there and we were looking at our budget for the month, we were $800 short each month in the hole. $800. And as you can tell, I never went without. We never went without. We actually even had better situations. We lived in a pretty crummy apartment for 3 months, and people at our church gave us a better townhome. Allie ended up getting a job a few months later, and we were a little bit above water. But we were $800 in the hole, and I sat there and fret. I sat there and wondered. I sat there and worried. I sat there and was frustrated. I didn't know why God brought us down here, and why did things not work out like they were advertised. But he did. The beautiful thing, though, that we see, whether you talk about yourself and your murmurings, you talk about the men on the boat, or you talk about this nation of Israel and their murmur against God, the beautiful thing is they're still his people. And we are still God's people. If you're saved here today, you are God's chosen people. The old joke of these two kids, one was adopted and one was biological child of the parents, and they said, Mommy and Daddy love me more because I'm their actual own. And the little adopted boy goes, well, yeah, Mommy and Daddy love me a whole lot more because they chose me and they were stuck with you. So God chose us to be his people. If you're saved here today, God chose you before the foundation of earth and gave up his son for you. And we see with all of our troubles and all of our sins and all of our shortcomings and all of our doubts that God is full of mercy. God is a merciful God. Numbers 2, verse 7, then the tribe... never mind. I don't know why I wrote that down. That's not what I wanted to put. Sorry. Deuteronomy 2, verse 7. For the Lord thy God hath blessed thee in all the works of thy hand. He knoweth thy walking through this great wilderness. These 40 years the Lord thy God hath been with thee, for thou hast lacked nothing. These people crossed God. They made him so furious that he was ready to be done with them. Moses pleaded with him. God rekindled his anger. They still had to pay for their sin they did, but we saw here in God's word, he said, God was still with them, and they lacked nothing. God is merciful. So we see the book of Deuteronomy is going to talk about Moses' last letter, and as we know, Moses ends up being able to see the promised land but not go into it, and he's buried, and his tomb will never be found, is what it says in the Bible. But we'll start reading in chapter 1 a little bit. I'm not for sure how far we'll go today, but just kind of wanted to try to give a background to Deuteronomy. It's Moses' fifth book to the nation of Israel. They're wandering in the wilderness because of the sin of doubt and disbelief, and we see God's relationship with his people, for the anger, a man of God who prays for him, the importance of prayer warriors that not bargains, but that begs and pleads with God to be merciful, to be mighty, to not turn his back on his people, and God doesn't. And every day I think we see the same thing because we murmur and God never turns his back on us. But verse 1, Moses recalls God's commandments. So Moses is telling his people here. Verse 1 says, "These be the words which Moses spake unto all Israel on this side of Jordan in the wilderness, in the plain over against the Red Sea, between Paran and Tophel and Laban and Hazeroth and Dizhab." So it's kind of telling you they have not yet crossed over the Jordan as they do in Joshua. Verse 2, "There are 11 days' journey from Horeb by the way Mount Seir unto Kadesh Barnea. And it came to pass in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the first day of the month, that Moses spake unto the children of Israel according unto all that the Lord had given him in commandment unto them. After he had slain Sihon, the king of Amorites, which dwelt in Heshbon, and Og, the king of Bashan, which dwelt in Ashtaroth and Edrei, on this side of Jordan, in the land of Moab, began Moses to declare this law, saying, The Lord your God spake unto us in Horeb, saying, Ye have dwelt long enough in this mount. Can you imagine how beautiful those words were for those people who knew they had to wander 40 years, and they hear Moses speak on behalf of God, saying that you have dwelt long enough. It's time to go. We're getting ready you'll be going soon. Turn you and take your journey, and go to the mount of the Amorites, and unto all the places nigh thereunto, in the plain, in the hills, in the vale, in the south, and by the seaside, to the land of the Canaanites, and unto the Lebanon, and to the great river Euphrates. Behold, I have set the land before you. Go in and possess the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give unto them and to their seed after them." And so we see in verse 2, the journey or path that the nation of Israel was on normally only took 11 days. It was an 11-day journey. But due to their sin, God made it a 40-year wandering, or 14,600 days. Talk about a rough ETA. You know, there's that extreme sport of trying to beat your ETA on your GPS, and they struggled with that one. But we see here what sin can do in our life. It can do in our relationship with God, and it can do what it can hinder in our way of blessings from him. If they would have trusted and not murmured against God when those spies went out, and now had the thought of Caleb, it would have been an 11-day journey to go there and take that promised land. But we see the spies in Numbers 13:26. When they went to this place to gather information, they came back. They sinned. They murmured against God, and for 40 years, they wandered. Plagues and death overtook them, and they never got to see this land that was promised to them. You see what sin and doubt can do in your relationship with God? You know, I imagine God being so angry, because if I sit there and tell my wife, baby, I love you, honey, I love you so much, and she doubts me, you gonna be happy? If you tell your spouse you love them and you care for them, and they look at you, I don't think so, I doubt you, and you're like, what else do I got to do to prove it to you, right? I've done X. I've put a ring on your finger. I've tried to feed, work hard to give a job, to put you in the best situation, to meet your needs. But we still doubt. And that would probably be really frustrating. And it'd be really hard if I had to convince my wife every day over and over again that I loved her. And she wouldn't believe me, even if sometimes I messed up. But God never messes up, and yet we still doubt his love after he proves it over and over. And we see in verse 3, it says, and it came to pass in the 40th year in the 11th month. And the 11th month in the Jewish calendar is called Kislev. And it was really interesting. If you all get a chance, I don't know if you're history nerds like I am, but read about the Jewish calendar and how they've had to alter it today to make it adhere with the calendar that is in America. But verse 4, Shion and Og were the rulers of kingdoms that dwelt on the east side of Jordan, where Moses was speaking currently. And we see Israel, the nation of Israel, defeated these nations, occupying their land on this day. In the land that they were here, the nation or the tribe of Reuben, Gad, and part of Manasseh would dwell there. And if you turn to Numbers 32, pardon me. Numbers 32, verse 1. Now the children of Reuben and the children of Gad had very great multitude of cattle. And when they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, that behold, that place was for cattle, the children of Gad and the children of Reuben came to speak to Moses and to Eleazar, the priest, unto the princes of the congregation, saying, Adaroth and Dibon and Jazer and Nimrah, Heshbon and Elah, and Shebam and Nebo and beyond, even the country which the Lord smote before the congregation of Israel, is a land for cattle, and thy servants have cattle. Wherefore said they, if we found grace in thy sight, let us this land be given unto thy servants for possession, and bring us not over Jordan. So you see, they're wanting this land that's before they cross over Jordan. And Moses has issues with that, thinking that they're trying to get out of fighting because they think that they're the 9.5 or 8.5 other tribes are going to cross over this Jordan. They're just going to sit there and hang out and not fight. But if you turn back down to Numbers 32, verse 20, it says, and Moses said unto them, if you will do this thing, if you will go armored before the Lord to war, and will go all of you armored over Jordan before the Lord until he hath driven out his enemies from before him, and the land be subdued before the Lord, and then afterward ye shall return and be guiltless before the Lord and before Israel, and this land shall be your possession before the Lord. And so you read in Joshua, they actually do go over and fight with him. But again, we see that this promised land is already being occupied, and Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh have taken over, or will take over eventually, this part of the land. Verse 6, again, when it is said, you have dwelt long enough in this mount, this wilderness, can you imagine how beautiful that must have sounded? We see here a picture of godly discipline. The Lord punished them for what they have done, but he still provided for them, and they moved on. And I've heard before that, my father, he got on to me when I needed to, and he might have whooped me, and it might have been hard to sit down at the table, but I had food at the table because it was godly discipline. He didn't starve me out and try to kill me. No, he corrected me where I was, but he still provided for me through the Lord. And in verse 7, we see it talks about all these people. It's basically talking about the entire land of Canaan that they're going to go over across this Jordan and conquer and take. But in verse 8, where it says, behold, I have set the land before you. Go in and possess the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, to give to them and their seed after them. So there's a promise here made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And something I just found really interesting. We turn to Genesis chapter 15. Genesis 15, verse 12. Genesis 15, verse 12. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, and horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abram, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them there 400 years. So God is giving Abraham this vision. In verse 12 through 13, we see about Abraham's seed, the nation of Israel, being in the land of Egypt as servants for 400 years. Verse 14, and also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge the plagues, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace, and thou shalt be buried in a good old age. But in the fourth generation thou shalt come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. And it came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. In the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river of Euphrates. The Kenites and the Kenizzites and the Commodianites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Remaphims and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Girgashites and the Jebusites. My dad once told me when I was growing up, he said, son, the older you get, the smarter I'll become. And how true he is in that statement. I know I probably told everyone that here, but I love that wisdom from my father, because, man, it is so true. And to this day, I wish I could talk to him about things. But our parents tell us things. They warn us from things. They provide us advice. And what do we do as children? We doubt or question if they even know what they're talking about. You're an old man. You don't know what it's like to be my age. Not understanding quite the concept of time, that one time they were your age, and which is why they're old. Oftentimes, this piece of advice or lessons often come true. But what more advice, lessons, love, and wisdom do we have with God than our parents? God cannot lie, and his promises are always true. I think about when a man and a woman love each other on their wedding day, they make vows to one another, right? For better or worse, for richer or poorer. And mine had to throw in for bald or hairy. But when you make those vows, you really hope that your spouse will stick to them, correct? You're hoping you will. There's some doubt because we're human, but you really are hoping that you're going to stick to those vows. You're really hoping that your spouse will stay true to those words. Or when a sports team and a player comes out and guarantees a win against the next team, as a fan, you really want to hope and wish that player will be able to follow through on his promise. You really hope that he'll be able to follow through and get that big win. But if we talk about those two situations, there's always a little bit of doubt in that hope. That hope's a little flimsy. But brothers and sisters, when God makes a promise for your future, that is not something you hope for. That is something you hope in. That is a hope that you can put your all in, because he never fails. How amazing is it that this is the God that we get to serve? A God that never fails, a God that never has ever once said a lie, that God has never once misspoken or taken a wrong step. That is the God we get to serve. I love my wife, but I've failed her. I love this church, I failed it. I love my friends, but I failed them. I've been a fan of sports teams that have failed me with those guaranteed wins. But God has never failed me. He said, I will never leave nor forsake you. But boy, we sure do act like he will. We see here in verse 8, back in our text, Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 8, that this conquest has already been decided years ago by God. He promised Abraham. He gave Abraham this vision. Sometimes people give vision and it's pretty close, or wow, it's right around it. You see the accuracy in Genesis 15, 12 through 21 of what the nation of Israel went through? It's verbatim. It's the God we serve. And so he also, right, and we believe that, right? We look at that and say, wow, man, how awesome is that? Israelite, just go. But yet in the Bible, I think King James, it says, fear not or be not afraid 103 times. And I feared, and I've been afraid. God tells us in his Bible plainly that he will never leave us nor forsake us. But when we go through a hard time, we act like, how in the world are we going to get through this, and who's going to be there for us? There's an old gospel song. It says, I've read the back of the book and we win. The cathedral sing it. And we know that, right? But we live this life like we hadn't read the back of the book and we don't know who wins. We still doubt and struggle. Verse 8, behold, I have set the land before you. Go in and possess the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers. Right there is why I believe Caleb felt in Numbers that they are well able to overcome. If you're saved here today, anything that we go through, the Lord has sworn us the victory. Now, it might not be here on this earth, because if this earth is your victory, then we need to check, as Brother Jason would say, check your heart. But the Lord has sworn to us that he will never leave us nor forsake us. He has sworn to us the promised land in heaven, but yet we still doubt. And in verse 8, it's so neat to see, behold, I have set the land up before you. Go in, possess that land which the Lord sware unto your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and give unto them their seed after them. Moses is telling the people through God, go and possess the land. The battle's already been decided. And we have that same comfort if you're saved here today. But yet oftentimes we have to send spies up anyway, and they come back with a trembling report of how we're going to get through this. We need to trust God with all that we have. He's not just some flimsy hope. He is what all your hope should be in. He's not a hope that, man, I'm kind of hoping it could, but it maybe won't happen. No, when you hope on God, it's going to happen. Verse 9, and I spake unto you at that time, saying, I am not able to bear you myself alone. The Lord your God hath multiplied you, and behold, ye are this day as the stars of the heaven for multitude. God promised Abraham that one day his seed would be innumerable. It's in Numbers 15, verse 4 through 6. He says it. Then shall he that offer his offspring unto the Lord bring a meat offering of a tenth deal of flour mingled with the fourth part of hin of oil, and the fourth part of hin of wine for a drink offering shalt thou prepare with the burnt offering. Well, I don't know. I wrote down something wrong. Sorry, Genesis 15. My bad. Genesis 15, verse 4 through 6. And behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, this shall not be thine heir, but he that shall come forth out of thine own bowels shall be thine heir. And he brought him forth abroad, and said, look now toward heaven, and tell the stars, if thou be able to number them. And he said unto them, so shall thy seed be. And he believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him for righteousness. And then also, we'll just real quick, Romans chapter 4. Romans 4, verse 16. Therefore it is of faith that it might be by grace, to the end of the promise might be sure to all the seed, not to that only which is of the law, but to that which is of faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all. As it is written, I have made thee as a father of many nations before him who hath believed, even God who hath quickened the dead, and called those things which be not as though they were, who against hope believed in hope, that he might become the father of many nations, according to that which is spoken, so shall thy seed be. And so we see again, God made promises. God has followed through with his promises over and over and over. But yet the children of Israel still doubt. And if we look at ourselves, yet we still doubt. We'll continue further in this verse, or in this book this afternoon, but there is so much in this book that is applicable today. Some people think the Old Testament's over and it doesn't really apply to us today, but I know my whole life I used to look at the Israelites and just never understood why they just didn't go. Why would you not just take the land like God told you? Why would you even send spies? It's almost what I thought. But then as you start going through your life and you look at yourself, how oftentimes we've doubted God, even though the decision of the battle has already been decided. God will never fail. He can't and he won't. May we not murmur against God, but may we trust him fully and go and take that which God has possessed us, or which God has given us. God has given us a hope of everlasting life. He's given us a vessel out of any hardship, out of any trouble, and he's given us his only begotten Son for salvation that we cannot earn. What do we have to fear or murmur? Brother Derek?
Let's all stand and grab a hymn book.